You're listening to the Libertarian Express Radio Network.
Welcome. Today is October 13th, 2013. In our last episode, we explored the difference between the people versus the public and the fact that we live in a democratic republic. So in this episode, I want to bring it home to you and explore what it means in modern terms. Essentially, those who are in the class, the people, are the ones who are supposed to be running the country, and the public is supposed to be maintaining the country. And remember, the public owns the country. Yet we live in a country where politicians believe they are above the law and should receive special treatment for no other reason than they are politicians. For example, let's consider congressional and presidential pay. We need to remember that these are individuals who are beneath the people. They are subservient to the people. They are, for lack of a better way to express this concept, something less than people. This is what they have volunteered for when they decided to run for election. Now, I work on a farm, and it's hard work. I get there early in the morning, and I work my ass off until it's time to go home. I arrive home, and I'm utterly exhausted almost every day. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the job, and in today's job market, I love having a job. It's good, honest work, and I do it well. Of course, it helps to have a boss who's politically and philosophically in line with me, but that aside, if I stop working for him after 8 years, do you really think that he will continue to pay me for the remainder of my life? Well, of course he wouldn't. And remember that this is a job that actually produces something useful and beneficial. But you see, that's exactly what we do with our presidents and congressmen and such. We give them a salary for the rest of their lives for a mere 2, 4, 6, or 8 years of work. And what have they done to earn it? Usually nothing. Almost always, especially since the election of Bush the Elder, politicians manage to really screw things up. I mean, let's really look at what politicians have accomplished just in my lifetime. Now, I was born during the Johnson administration, so we had the whole Vietnam thing going on at that time. And then there was Tricky Dick and his whole "I'm not a crook" thing going on just before he was implicated in Watergate. And of course he resigned in disgrace. In fact, that whole scandal was so disgraceful that even the vice president had to resign. And this left the Speaker of the House to become president. And when he did, Gerald Ford is walking into the White House, and as he's walking in, Nixon's walking out, and Nixon bumps into Ford. And of course, Ford falls down. Nixon looks down at him and says, "Pardon me," if you know what I mean. And that's exactly what Ford does. He pardons Nixon for his crimes. He then literally stumbles through the remainder of his term in office. And now this paved the way for Jimmy Carter. Now, Carter had some successes while he was in office, but he will forever be remembered as the president who could not rescue the hostages being held in Iran. Now, Reagan used this situation to his advantage, and he won the White House. And while he will, for right or wrong, be credited with bringing down the Soviet Union, let us not forget that he is also responsible for the Iran-Contra affair. Of course, he couldn't remember much about it by the time he left office due to his development of Alzheimer's. But his vice president was then elected to the office on the promise of "read my lips, no new taxes." He then proceeded to create new taxes, and he picked a fight with So Damn Insane, a fight which I had the opportunity to participate in. Now, I want to make it perfectly clear up to this on this next point. Up to this point in history, the office of the President of the United States of America was a respected office the world over. When the American president spoke, the entire world listened, and they adjusted their plans accordingly, whether they were friend or foe. Even our enemies respected the President of the United States. But then a new generation of voters took over, a generation of selfish and entitled children. Now, unfortunately, I am part of that generation. Now, though I didn't vote for him, Bill Clinton was elected to the office because he could feel our pain. Well, what he was really doing was feeling the undergarments of his interns. I mean, seriously, this guy told the nation that he was so inept he could not even smoke a joint properly. And he was still elected to the office of the presidency. Unbelievable. He single-handedly is responsible for making the office of the presidency a laughingstock to the rest of the world. Now, personally, I don't care that he was receiving blowjobs while he was in the office. Okay, it really doesn't matter to me, because seriously, it's no worse than things that Kennedy did, or Roosevelt did, or some of the other presidents that we absolutely adore. Okay? Now, if he had gone out onto the White House lawn and done these things with Lewinsky, then that would be another matter. Okay, but he didn't. He did it in the privacy of the Oval Office. But we reelected him anyway, and he will forever be known as the blowjob president. But it gets worse. And I have to accept my share of the responsibility for this one, because I did vote for Bush the Younger. And all I can say is I voted for what I perceived to be the lesser of two evils. I mean, I was young, and I still believe the whole voting for a third party is a bad thing rhetoric. So I voted for Bush, a man who cannot form a coherent sentence, a man who lied to us and got us into another war with his daddy's archenemy. So damn insane. Based on those lies. A man who, like our current president, was hell-bent on securing government power and restricting personal freedom for the people. A man who began this whole never-ending war on terrorism. Now, talk about your Orwellian 1984 type scenario. Terrorists are the perfect enemy. I mean, they're always there. They are always a good scapegoat for increasing government tyranny and restricting constitutional freedoms. I mean, I can almost hear the public loudspeakers now. Al-Qaeda is our enemy. Al-Qaeda has always been our enemy. Or, Iran is our enemy. Iran has always been our enemy. And I truly expect very soon in the future to hear China is our ally. China has always been our ally. And I expect that I will probably be hearing it in a thick Chinese accent as well. Thank you for that, G-Dub. But the people weren't done electing idiots to office. No, they had one more left in them, and they elected Barack Hussein Obama to the office of the presidency. Now, was this because of his vast political experience? His years as a community organizer and 2 whole years in the Senate? I don't think so. Was it because of his message of hope and change? Well, no, I don't think that's the case either, because nobody really believed it. So why was he elected? Let's just tell the truth here. He was elected because he was a black man. Well, he's half black anyway. Now, I know that seems racist, but I assure you it's not. It's simply a fact. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm happy that America had finally gotten past the whole race issue that kept other men like Jesse Jackson or other black men who ran for president from being elected. But at the same time, I have to say to the African American community, I am so sorry. America finally gets over its racist issues And the first African American we elect to the office is probably the poorest representative of their culture. In fact, he's probably the poorest representative of the human race on this planet since Adolf Hitler. I mean, this idiot will probably be the single reason why a minority will not again be elected to the office of the presidency for a very long time. We have not had in my lifetime a president worthy of a lifetime pension for his 2, 4, or 8 years in office. Now, I'm 46 years old at the time of this recording. In the last 46 years, this nation has been in a perpetual state of war. From Vietnam at my birth to today's present war on terrorism taking place in various locations across the globe, we have gone from one conflict to another. And it seems as if the presidents believe that this is part of their job description. I am president, therefore I must war upon other nations. Our current president, Obama, he was hailed as the great peacemaker, the great healer. Yeah, sure. He's bringing peace to the world, all right, one war at a time. Now, whether we like to believe it or not, whether we want to believe it or not, America has become a third world country. We just haven't realized it yet. But let's take a look around. Let's look at the facts. Our infrastructure is failing because we cannot afford proper upkeep. Our troops in harm's way are not getting the armor or the weapons or even the food that they need. We no longer have political clout with countries that used to hang on our every word. Our enemies no longer fear us, and our allies no longer seek our counsel. Our economy is literally unable to sustain itself because of the debt burden that we've created. Our political system has become completely dysfunctional. Voter fraud in America, and it's rampant. And our elected representatives behave like spoiled children when they don't get their way. I mean, grown men throwing temper tantrums on Capitol Hill. Seriously. Our taxes have become increasingly burdensome. Our freedoms are all but gone. Police run around in military tactical gear and armored tanks abusing and murdering people without cause or repercussion. It's probably why our troops don't have any. Our Constitution is no longer considered the greatest document ever written, but rather it's treated as a tattered parchment, a stumbling block to be overcome. And the American people are no longer interested in an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. Now it's all about how can I get rich by exploiting others. Fear is the American people's state of existence. That didn't used to be. We used to be people who were not afraid to walk the streets or eat the food that we produce or drink the water we pumped into the cities. But now our genetically modified food is sickening us, and our fluoridated water is poisoning us. Gangs rule the streets of our greatest cities. Rule of law is now enforced at the end of a gun rather than in a courthouse. Our system of jurisprudence is rigged in favor of the prosecution rather than the accused, making a fair trial impossible. People are taught to depend upon the system for their needs rather than to be self-sufficient, or at the very least partially self-sufficient. Our houses of worship are emptying, and instead we're worshiping the almighty dollar. Now recently, our servants on Capitol Hill could not agree on a few points, and they decided to shut down the government. And this means that approximately 18% of the government is currently not active. Now, did Congress stop receiving their paychecks? No. Did the president? No. Did average Americans who happen to hold low-level positions in the government stop receiving their paychecks? Yes. They are the ones who are suffering for Congress's inability to function. Then the president decides he's going to shut down our national parks and monuments and memorials. Now remember how I told you in the last episode that the term republic means that the citizenry owns everything. And that includes our national parks and our monuments and our memorials. The federal government has no more authority to shut down national parks than they do to shut down Native American reservations. Now, you don't see them doing that, do you? Of course not. They'd have a war on their hands because they know Native Americans will stand up and fight for themselves. But they also know that Americans will not stand up for their rights. Now, there are a few who will complain and whine and snivel just loud enough to be covered by the mainstream media. Then the propaganda machine kicks into gear, and the blame game starts. And we start hearing, it's the Republicans' fault, or it's the Democrats' fault. Well, the truth is, it isn't either of those two parties' fault. It's the American citizenry's fault because they allowed it to happen. Now, of course, there are a few good Americans who defied that directive by the president. Our World War II veterans decided not to obey that. They decided no servant was going to tell them that they could not visit the World War II memorial that they paid for in more ways than one. And I say good on you, veterans. My question is, though, why aren't the rest of Americans doing exactly the same thing? I mean, the precedent has already been set. They defied the order and nothing happened. Why? Because the government doesn't have the authority. So why can you not be bothered to get off your fat, lazy, drugged up asses and get out there and stand up for what is rightfully yours? The truth is, the federal government does not have the authority to shut down any national monument, park, or memorial because the federal government does not own them. We do. The citizenry of America owns them. The government's only responsibility is to provide money for cleanup and maintenance of these treasures. Their authority ends there. But since nobody challenged their authority, by default they now have the authority to do whatever they wish with regard to our national treasures. And all these things are exactly opposite of the country that our founders created. We are not a country that is evolving. We are a country that is devolving. We're going backwards. And our system is more like that which we fought so hard to separate from in 1776. And now, with the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, as the law, we're going to be a nation of criminals, as few are going to be able to afford health care and will be imprisoned for their inability to participate. And that's called debtor's prison. One of the things we fought the revolution to do away with in this country. Not since the Civil War has our country been as divided politically as it is today. And not since the Civil War has the country been as angry as it is today. Not since the Civil War has our country been as volatile as it is today. But not ever in the history of our country have the people been so unwilling to do anything about it. And that's why we're losing. This mess is not going to fix itself. It's going to take the entire nation to fix things. And that begins with those who are most responsible for the country, the people. We've had decades of political chaos and instability that have brought this country to its knees. And these politicians who are most responsible for that want us to pay their salaries for the rest of their lives. It's time that we remind the public servants that they are the servant class, and they are not entitled to anything. Once they have finished their public service, if they want a paycheck, they need to earn one just like everyone else. I mean, there's no free rides for the ruling class in this country. Why are we giving them to the servant class? And I'll tell you why. It's because the servant class has convinced the people of this country that the servants are the masters and the masters are the servants. And they've engaged in this propaganda for so long now that the people believe it because they have heard it for so long. It's time for another revolution in this country. Not an armed revolution, but a social revolution. It's time that the masters of this country take the servants across their knees and give them an ass whooping. We need to get that hickory branch out, and we need to spank some political ass. And we need to start with congressional reform. We need to pass a constitutional amendment that forces the administrative and legislative branches of our government to abide by the same laws they pass for the people. No more favoritism. No more allowing Congress to pass laws and then exempt themselves from those laws. If we, the people, have to abide by those laws, if the citizenry of this country has to abide by the laws they pass, they must also. We need to pass restrictive lobbying laws to prevent lobbyists from large corporations from buying laws which favor them and restrict the rights of the people. And yes, I am referring to companies like Monsanto, okay, any oil company. We need to set term limits and salary limits for politicians. No more than 6 terms total for the House of Representatives, and no more than 2 terms total for the Senate, and no more than a total of 12 years for any member of Congress. What that means is if a person runs for House of Representatives and serves his 6 terms, he cannot then turn around and run for Senate because he's already done 12 years, and he cannot serve more. And more importantly than all of that is once you've left public office, your paycheck ends. No more pay for the rest of your lives. If you want a retirement pension, if you want a paycheck, then you go out and you earn it like everyone else. We need to shut down or privatize at least half of the government agencies. Now, I understand why we need the CIA, and I understand why we need the FBI. I get it. But we don't need the NSA, we don't need the ATF, we don't need the IRS, or any of the rest of the cacophony of alphabet soup agencies that we have. All right? If you want to collect taxes, then let's make the tax system fair. Let's get rid of the income tax altogether. Well, we don't really have an income tax. We just believe we have an income tax, but we don't really have one. But let's just get rid of that belief altogether, and let's just have a national sales tax. A national sales tax of, about 5% would take care of all the government's needs. It would cover all the constitutionally mandated requirements that the government has. It will provide for a military, a post office, government employee pay. Any surplus left over from any budget must then be given back to the American people of the United States. The people, not the citizenry, the people. There's no more giving aid to countries that hate us. No more grants for studying cow farts. No more subsidies for big agri or big oil. None of that. It all goes away. You want to study cow farts? Go get your own damn money to study cow farts. Quit using my tax money. 'Cause I need roads. I need airports. I need seaports. These are things that we need. We need to pass laws that restrict the government spending and require the federal government to pass a balanced budget every year. In fact, I think that should be a constitutional amendment. Further, we need to pass laws that restrict how much the government can spend on its needs. No more $600 toilet seats and $300 hammers. If the average price of a toilet seat is $50, then the government cannot spend more than $50 for a toilet seat. If the average price of a hammer is $20, then the government cannot spend more than that on a hammer. We need to pass laws that respect the sovereignty of our country. For example, foreign corporations can import their goods if they want to. Hell, I say let them import tariff-free. But they cannot own American land, they cannot own American-formed companies, and they cannot own any other kind of property in America. So, as an example, let's say Mercedes-Benz wants to sell their cars in America. Then they need to sell those cars to an American dealer who is willing to offer them to the people or the public. If American companies cannot compete with foreign companies, then too damn bad. If you cannot manufacture a car and sell it for the same amount that Toyota can, then you'd better expect to go out of business. Or you'd better learn to control your expenses and your unions. We need to pass laws that restrict government intrusion into the monetary affairs of corporations. Now, what I mean by this is no more bailouts. No more defining companies as too big to fail. If General Motors can't compete, then too damn bad for them. It's not the place of the government to pick the winners and losers in the markets. If a bank fails because its business practices are corrupt, then the bank fails. Let it die. We need to affirm state sovereignty over the federal government. It's not the place of the federal government to tell the states what laws they must pass or enforce. That is up to the people of each state to decide. If the people of a state decide they want to make automobile insurance, for example, mandatory, or motorcycle helmets, or whatever, then fine, that's their choice. It's their state. They live in it. They vote there. That's their decision to make. It is not the place of the federal government to force those types of decisions on the people. Living in a free society involves risk. It involves a lot of risk. We cannot have both a free and safe society. In fact, there's no such thing as a safe society anywhere on this planet. No matter where you go, there is risk. If you're in Switzerland, you could get hit by a truck. If you're in Russia, you could die in a plane crash. If you're in Ghana, you could be killed by insurgents. If you're in China, you could fall into a ditch and break your arms and legs. If you're in America, you could contract a deadly disease. If you're in the middle of nowhere, with no other creature around you for 10 miles in all directions, you can still get hit by a meteorite. The point is, if you're alive, you are taking a risk. The only way to eliminate all risk to your person is to die. Any laws taken for consideration by Congress must be designed to enhance the people's freedoms rather than to restrict them in the name of safety and security. It's not the government's function to keep us safe. Freedom is, by its very nature, unsafe, and it's up to each individual to provide for their own safety. Passing restrictive laws in the name of safety should be considered unconstitutional. Now, there are many other reforms that must be made, but I think you're getting my point here. We need to clean house, so to speak. We need to commit to freedom and stop allowing others to restrict our freedoms simply because they failed to adequately assess the risks involved in a free society and prepare for them. I mean, since we all have to live in a world of risk and danger, wouldn't it be better to live in a free world rather than one that's restricted or enslaved? Wouldn't it be better to have the freedom to choose what level of risk you're willing to accept rather than have others dictate to you what levels are acceptable and what levels are not? Do we really want to live in a country where you can go to prison for not having health insurance? Do we really want to live in a country where we're told what foods to eat and how much soda we can consume? The answer from every American should only be no. If your answer is anything other than that, you need to get the hell out of America and go live in a country where freedom is not valued and personal responsibility is considered a liability rather than a virtue. Because here in America, we love our freedom and we take responsibility for our actions and our choices. I'm Robert Rowe. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you have any comments, you can email me at libertarianexpress@gmail.com. That's libertarianexpress@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. And as always, I hope you have a great day.